Hey guys, tonight we step inside a smoky, creaking longhouse on the edge of a frozen fjord, where the winds howl like wolves outside and the only thing between you and frostbite is a low thatched roof and 20 other humans breathing in rhythm. Your eyes water as you squint through the dim orange glow of a fire pit, and already you're trying to imagine how anyone, not just anyone, you, could fall asleep in this scratchy, smoky, shoulder-to-shoulder setup. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this. Not comfortably, anyway, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough to tell time. Drop your location and local hour in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the packed snow toward the longhouse, the only sign of life in an otherwise endless tundra wrapped in a curtain of northern darkness. The bitter wind slices through your wool tunic, and even the breath in your beard begins to freeze. Inside, though, it's a different world, well, not quite warm, but certainly warmer. You duck through the low doorway and are immediately wrapped in the heavy scent of wood smoke, fermented fish, and damp wool. Cozy, if you're being generous. The longhouse is long, obviously. Stretching the length of 2 modern buses, made of thick wooden planks reinforced with turf and sod. The walls are sturdy, packed with layers of moss and clay, their purpose less decorative and more defensive, against both the wind and the wolves. No windows. No insulation. No radiators. Just one big communal space, broken by low partitions and woven curtains to mark off sleeping spots. And at the center, a long fire trench, its flickering heat the closest thing to mercy this northern world has to offer. Around it, families gather. You see them wrapped in cloaks, hunched low, arms draped over children, over elders, over dogs and sometimes even goats. Body heat is precious. Privacy is a myth. You're expected to contribute your warmth, not hoard it. If you're the type who insists on personal space, well, good luck out there in the snowbank. The roof is low, not because the Vikings were short, they were about average for their time, despite the rumors, but to trap heat. And yes, it traps everything else too, like smoke. There's a hole in the ceiling somewhere, but let's just say it's not doing a stellar job. Your eyes sting. You cough. You can already feel soot settling in your lungs. And that's just your first hour inside. Historians still argue whether the benefits of indoor fires outweighed the long-term respiratory effects. You suspect the Vikings weren't doing much peer-reviewed research in that department, but the fire, oh, the fire, is everything. It roars in the middle of the room, and its heat, such as it is, radiates outward like a stingy sun. The trick is not just the flame, but how it's used. Stones are arranged to hold the warmth long after the wood dies down. The floor beneath you is hard-packed earth, sometimes layered with straw or animal pelts, anything to shield bare skin from cold ground. At night, everyone sleeps here. That includes parents, children, cousins, that one uncle who talks in his sleep, and the animals, who absolutely count as part of the family, especially in winter. Cows in the buyer's stall at one end, goats and sheep closer to the humans. Their warm bodies, their constant breath, and the soft rustling of straw are weirdly comforting, like a woolen lullaby, your sleeping spot. If you're lucky, it's a wooden bench with a bearskin. More likely, it's a pile of moss and fur in the corner, sandwiched between someone's snoring grandfather and a flatulent dog named Bjorn. Still, it beats freezing outside. Most nights, you crawl in fully clothed, no one stripping down for bed when the indoor temperature hovers just above freezing. You wear your woolens, your hood, and if you're wise, a spare pair of dry socks. Sleeping naked is a modern luxury. Here, it's a death wish. Every family has their rituals. Some smother embers in a clay pot to preserve coals until morning. Others pray to household gods for protection. And almost everyone tucks something warm into the bedding, a stone from the hearth, a baked brick, or a pouch of hot ashes. These little heat bombs can make the difference between numb toes and actual frostbite. The sounds are familiar, if not always pleasant. Someone snores. Someone coughs. Somewhere, a baby wails, then is hushed with soft murmurs. The wind outside tests the seams of the house, whistling like a curse. But here, in this smoke-thick womb of wood and wool, you feel, almost, safe. The longhouse wasn't just a shelter. It was a system. A machine of survival powered by fire, family, and friction. It insulated not just against cold, but against isolation. No one in here sleeps alone unless they're very sick, or very dead. You're part of a tangle of limbs and breath and warmth that spans generations. It's intimate. It's itchy. It's occasionally gross. But it works, and when morning comes, and trust me, it takes its sweet time in Viking winter. You emerge groggy, half suffocated from your neighbor's armpit and with a new respect for the term cabin fever. You stretch, yawn, and blink through smoke. The coals are barely glowing. Someone curses in Old Norse and goes to fetch kindling. You pull your cloak tighter, shuffle toward the fire, and begin again. Later, when the day ends, which in winter might be about noon, you'll do it all over again. No central heating, no heated blankets, no space heaters buzzing in the corner. Just fire, fur, and 40 degrees of body heat, and if that's not enough, well, there's always Bjorn the dog. You wake with a cough, dry, scratchy, deep in the throat. That's not surprising. What is surprising is that everyone else is already up and moving around like this smoke isn't turning their lungs into driftwood. You rub your eyes, which sting constantly, and squint toward the central hearth. It's still glowing faintly, but the fire needs attention. And here's the thing, in a Viking longhouse, it's always fire o'clock. The hearth is the heart. Not just metaphorically. Literally, it's the central pit dug into the floor and flanked with stones, usually oval-shaped and carefully arranged to reflect heat outward. Except, there's no chimney. You think maybe you missed it, but no, there isn't one. Not in the way you'd imagine. Some homes have a simple smoke hole in the thatch, but if the wind's wrong, or the snow's too heavy, the smoke just hangs around like a clingy guest. You inhale and it tastes like soot stew. There's a trade-off here. The smoke is unpleasant, sure. It's suffocating, definitely. But it also helps preserve the wooden beams by discouraging mold. And here's the real twist, smoke deters bugs. Insects, parasites, lice, fleas, none of them love a house full of floating ash particles. So while you're hacking up a lung, your skin is being spared the worst of the six-legged nightmares. Historians still argue whether this side benefit was an intentional Viking strategy or a miserable coincidence. It's also why your cloak smells like smoked pork. It's been airing above the fire all night, strung on a beam with other garments. They're not drying, exactly, they're slowly roasting. But that's still preferable to sleeping in damp wool. And yes, everything smells like this. Everything. Hair, blankets, even the food. Welcome to Ode Viking. Speaking of which, cooking happens right there over the same fire. That's right. Your dinner is prepared a foot from where your boots are melting. The cook, usually the matriarch or an elder, squats over the flames, stirring a stew thick with barley, turnips, and bits of smoked meat. It simmers slowly, drawing out what little heat the coals can give. You watch the bubbles rise in a rhythm you could fall asleep to if your eyes didn't sting so badly. Because there's no chimney, the smoke builds up. It doesn't escape in a neat, polite line, it loiters. It rolls along the roof beams, curls in the upper space like a second ceiling. The lower your bed, the better your odds of breathing. Some people even lie on the floor not because it's warmer, it's not, but because there's simply less smoke down there. Eventually, someone gets the brilliant idea to prod the fire to life. They add fresh wood, birch bark first, then dried logs, and it crackles to life, sending a new surge of warmth and, unfortunately, more smoke. The wind outside is no help. If it's calm, the smoke trickles upward. If it's gusty, it backdrafts into the room like the gods themselves are trying to smoke you out. You step outside to catch your breath. The cold hits instantly, like a slap from Thor. Your nose burns. Your eyes water. Your fingers scream at you through your mittens. But the air is clean. Crisp. Almost sweet after the indoor inferno, just don't linger. You'll freeze faster than a codfish if you stand still too long. So you head back inside, blinking like someone who's just seen the sun for the first time in years. The door slams shut behind you, and the smoke welcomes you back like a jealous lover. Back inside, life continues as usual. Children play, elders mutter, and someone sharpens a bone needle near the fire's edge. You realize the Vikings didn't just tolerate smoke, they adapted around it. They squinted through it, coughed through it, and maybe even began to prefer it to the alternative: cold, silence, and death. Some longhouses, especially in wealthier settlements, experimented with different ventilation setups. Narrow vertical slits in the walls. Loose roof tiles that could be nudged aside. Even stone-lined vents at roof level. None worked especially well, but they're signs of a people constantly tinkering with the balance between warmth and suffocation. And then there were the firestones. Smooth, dark river rocks placed directly into the flames, then carried carefully into bedding. These stones radiated heat for hours, no smoke, just cozy warmth if you didn't drop one on your foot. You could almost mistake them for primitive hot water bottles, minus the water, the bottle, and the not burning your skin part. Night comes early. Again. And once more, the fire is tended. Coals banked, embers carefully preserved. The smoke thickens once more. You lie down near the edge of the hearth pit, wrapping yourself tighter in furs. You cough. The person next to you coughs. And in the background, the fire crackles, its pops and hisses the Viking lullaby. You imagine modern visitors gagging on entry, their eyes watering, their phones melting from the humidity. But to the Vikings, this was life. Fire was the boundary between survival and surrender. It demanded a price, smoke in your lungs, soot on your skin, but it gave something greater in return: another night alive, another tale for tomorrow. And as you drift off, your nose half buried in a bundle of fur, you wonder how anyone back then had lungs that didn't collapse by age 30. Then again, maybe they did. No one was keeping pulmonary statistics. Still, for all its discomfort, there's something peaceful here. The dim glow. The steady heat. The sense of being enclosed, not trapped. Of being watched over, not by smoke, but by flame. And so you sleep again, just you, the fire, and 40,000 invisible particles dancing above your head. You wake up with a face full of wool. Not the soft, dreamy kind either. This stuff scratches like a bramble bush and smells faintly of goat. You peel it off, blinking through morning smoke, and begin the day the same way any sensible Viking would, by putting on even more of it, because no matter how many layers you wore last night, it's colder now. The fires died to sullen embers, and you can practically feel the frost creeping back through the walls. So before you do anything else, you start layering. And layering. And layering. First, the undertunic, usually linen if you're lucky, but more often a coarse wool base layer. It's stiff. It's itchy. And you better not take it off for at least a week. Over that comes a thicker woolen tunic, dyed in faded reds, browns, or dirty yellows if someone in your family got creative with plants and bark. Then you add your trousers, yes, also wool, and tie them tight with cords around your calves to trap body heat. But wait, there's more. Your feet slide into woolen socks, sometimes 2 pairs if they're thin. Then into boots, thick, oiled leather or hide, often lined with fur. The soles are rough, barely stitched, and not waterproof by any modern standard. You wrap your legs in puttees, long strips of wool cloth wound around your shins, to trap warmth and maybe hold your joints together, and finally, the outer layer. A thick woolen cloak. Clasped with a metal brooch, heavy enough to double as a blanket. If you're fancy or raided the right village last year, it might be edged with fur. Otherwise, it's just heavy. Heavy and wet from yesterday's snow, but still the best barrier between your limbs and frostbite. Now you're dressed like a walking carpet. Your breath puffs visibly from your beard, or what counts as a beard, which may also be half frozen. The Vikings didn't shave much in winter. Why would they? Facial hair was free insulation. In fact, some sagas describe warriors with frost-covered beards crackling in the wind, as if proudly wearing icicles like medals. Historians still debate whether these descriptions are literal or poetic exaggeration. Either way, your chin feels crunchy, your hands are the real problem. Mittens exist, felted wool bags with thumb flaps, but they're clumsy, and good luck holding an axe or needle with those on. So most people alternate, hands in mittens when idle. Out when working, back in before fingers go numb. It's a dangerous dance. Clothing wasn't just for comfort, it was survival. Viking communities invested serious effort into textile production. Women spun wool by hand using drop spindles, then wove it on upright looms, beating the cloth into submission with wooden swords. Dyes came from plants, lichens, even insects. A purple cloak might mean status, or just that someone boiled a lot of crushed bugs, and the wool itself. Viking sheep were no joke. Their coats produced a dual-layered fleece, one coarse and one fine, that could be separated for different uses. Thick outer layers for cloaks and tents. Softer strands for tunics or undergarments. If you were important enough to avoid itch, your cloak, as you soon realize, becomes part of your bedding. It's not removed when you lie down, just rearranged. Same with your boots. Taking them off risks frozen toes, so you often sleep in them, or at least with them under your body for warmth. And if they do freeze overnight, you'll spend a fun half-hour dancing by the fire trying to soften them without burning your soles. Then there's the hat. A simple woolen hood or cap, tied under your chin or pulled low over your brow. Losing heat through your head isn't just a myth, it's a fact of Viking life. So you keep that noggin wrapped, even indoors. Some even pull their cloaks over their heads while sleeping, turning themselves into steaming burritos of body heat and sheep fuzz. It's not elegant. It's not breathable. But it works. Fringe garments appear too. Animal skins, especially from bears, wolves, or reindeer, were prized for outerwear. They were heavy and bulky, but on a -30 night, no one cares if you look like a taxidermy experiment. Children were often wrapped entirely in hides and swaddled tight. Babies? They wore miniature wool suits and were packed like sausages between parents. If you've ever wondered where the term bundle of joy came from, it's probably somewhere in this frozen arrangement. You try walking. It's awkward. Your limbs feel like they belong to a scarecrow. But the more you move, the warmer you get. That's the idea. Keep moving. Keep the blood flowing. Sitting still for too long is a one-way ticket to numbness, and then comes the worst part. You need to relieve yourself. Going outside means stripping off at least one layer and exposing vulnerable skin to the screaming wind. There are no heated bathrooms. No porcelain. Just a wooden outhouse or, in some cases, a designated bush behind the longhouse. If you're lucky, it's been used enough to melt a path. If not, you're digging through snow with gloved hands and trying not to think about your circulation. Pee fast. Pray faster. Still, you return, shivering but alive. And that's a win. Later, if you need to venture far, you'll wrap yourself again, this time with added accessories. A second cloak. An oiled hide against sleet. A scarf or neck flap tied tight. You'll look less like a warrior and more like a particularly determined potato, but that's fine. Warm potatoes survive the winter. As the fire roars once again, you sit near the flames, hands outstretched, cloak steaming slightly from snow melt. You look around at your fellow frostfighters. Their cheeks are raw, their noses red, their hair full of smoke. But they're here. They're layered. They're warmish, and you're wrapped like a medieval lasagna. Under all that wool, under that fur, under the smoke and the stories, you're warm enough. Barely, and that's the Viking way. You don't just survive the Viking winter, you feed your survival. And tonight, you finally understand why Viking meals are heavy, hot, and suspiciously rich in animal fat. You're not just eating for taste. You're eating to stay warm. Every bite is internal insulation. Every spoonful of stew is a small victory against the cold. Breakfast, if it can even be called that, comes in the form of porridge. Thick, gloopy, sometimes sweetened with honey if the household is lucky or blessed with a trade stash. More often, it's just barley or rye boiled down with water or thin milk, occasionally flecked with foraged herbs. Not exactly a 5-star meal, but it sticks to your ribs. And when you step out into that frigid dawn, your stomach becomes a kind of slow-burning furnace. Later in the day, the main event arrives: stew. Always stew. It sits in a cast-iron cauldron dangling above the central fire, never fully emptied, always topped up with whatever's available. Think of it as a rolling buffet, one where yesterday's turnips become today's base for salted fish and maybe a bit of leftover mutton. The longer it simmers, the better it gets. Or at least, the less you notice the strange textures. You dip your spoon, a carved piece of wood with a cracked handle, and bring the stew to your lips. Steam fogs your eyelashes. The broth scalds your tongue just enough to remind you it's working. Inside that simple mixture lies the essence of Viking survival: protein, fat, and heat. Calories are king in the cold. You burn them just staying alive, even if you never leave the house. So Viking meals don't dabble in salads or dainty portions. They aim for bulk. Root vegetables like turnips, carrots, and leeks. Beans and lentils. Boiled grains. Pickled herring. Fermented shark, if you're feeling daring or your nose has gone fully numb, and always, animal fat. Rendered from pork, sheep, or cattle, it's smeared on bread, mixed into gruel, and used to fry flat cakes on hot stones. It's not a garnish, it's central heating in edible form. Historians still argue whether the high-fat diet was entirely born from necessity or if it evolved into a cultural preference. Either way, you soon find yourself reaching for another scoop of lard-laced stew without hesitation, and then there's the drink. Water's fine if it hasn't frozen solid, but most households lean towards something warmer, and a little more intoxicating. Ale, brewed in wooden vats with barley and wild herbs. Or mead, honey wine left to ferment in dark corners of the longhouse. It doesn't just warm your chest. It makes the evenings bearable. You don't feel the cold quite as deeply after 2 mugs. Or at least you stop caring. Occasionally, during festivals or after successful hunts, the menu expands. Roasted venison. Baked trout. Whole geese stuffed with herbs and onions. The smells fill the house like incense, rich, oily, savory. You chew slowly, savoring the warmth that seems to creep from your tongue to your fingertips. This isn't feasting for pleasure. It's biological strategy. A full belly makes a better heater than any cloak, and if you're truly lucky, you get cheese. Hard, crumbly discs made from goat or cow milk, often stored in cellars or buried underground in cool clay jars. You shave off a piece. Let it soften on your tongue, and for a moment, just a moment, you almost forget your toes are frozen, meal times double as gatherings. Storytelling, singing, debating whose turn it is to chop firewood. Children wrestle on fur mats while elders sip broth and reminisce about winters that were colder, harsher, and somehow more heroic. Every ladle of stew comes with a side of saga. Even the method of cooking is strategic. You notice how the fire is maintained to suit the stew, not too hot, not too low. Coals are banked on one side for slow boiling, flames fan gently for occasional roasting. Cooking in winter is constant. Not just for food, but for warmth. The kitchen is the heating system, and the stew pot. It never stops. If someone drops in unexpected, or returns late from hunting, they can always scoop a bowl. It's a kind of edible hearth, always ready, always shared. Night falls, and once again the house settles into its smoky rhythm. Your stomach is full, or at least full enough. You burp softly, then glance at your neighbor, who does the same and grins. It's not rude. It's reassurance, I made it through another cold day. Before sleep, some chew dried fruits, if any were preserved from the autumn harvest. Apples, plums, berries turned leathery with time but still sweet enough to chase the bitterness of boiled roots. Others nibble on strips of smoked meat, jerky with enough salt to dry your tongue for days. The more portable, the better, especially if you're traveling soon, and travel does come. But that's for later. For now, you wrap yourself in your cloak, belly humming with calories, breath slow and warm. The fire crackles. Someone snores. A dog huffs in its sleep. You don't have a thermostat. You are the thermostat. And the food you just ate. The stew, the fat, the fire-roasted root vegetables, isn't just dinner, it's armor. You're tired, full of stew, and wrapped like a caterpillar in layers of wool and fur. But you're not crawling off to some quiet corner of your own. Nope. Not tonight. Not any night. Because in a Viking longhouse, privacy is as rare as a sunny January afternoon in Iceland. If you're lucky, you'll share your sleep space with just 2 people. If you're normal, it'll be 4. And if you're unlucky, well, let's just say you're going to learn a lot about your cousin's snoring habits. You move toward your assigned bed, if bed is the right word for a wooden platform with a few straw mats and an old bearskin tossed over it. Think of it less as a mattress and more as a group nap situation carved out of necessity. Your room is a curtained alcove barely big enough to sit up in, separated from the next alcove by nothing but a squeaky wooden slat and someone else's muffled sleep talking. Vikings called these sleeping compartments bed closets, and they were often built along the longhouse walls, raised off the ground to avoid cold drafts and vermin. Some were fancy enough to have wooden doors that creaked shut, but most just had heavy cloth for privacy, a thin veil that blocked sight but not sound. Or smell. Especially not smell. You wriggle inside, careful not to knock your elbow against the wooden edge or someone's knee. There's no real order to the sleeping arrangements, either. Families. Friends, servants, travelers, all lumped together as space allows. The real estate closest to the fire goes to the elders or sick. The rest of you shuffle into the cold corners like wool-wrapped sardines. You settle in next to a familiar warmth. It's Bjorn. Again. Not the dog this time, but the cousin with a fondness for onions and a blanket-stealing problem. You sigh and shift. He sighs and shifts. A third person turns over and whacks both of you with an elbow. And somehow, this awkward tangle is supposed to help you sleep, and it does. Because despite the discomfort, despite the accidental facefuls of beard and the stale breath drifting through the air, you're warm. Warmer than you'd be anywhere else. Body heat, multiplied across 5 or 6 people, creates a cocoon of shared survival. A furnace made of flesh and wool. And when the wind screams outside, clawing at the thatched roof and rattling the wooden beams, that heat is all that stands between you and hypothermia. Sometimes, you sleep head to foot. Not because of manners, but to avoid breathing directly into each other's faces. Other times, you pile in shoulder to shoulder, limbs overlapping, trying not to think about where someone's foot might be. Historians still debate how strictly the Vikings organized these sleep zones. Were they gendered? Age-specific? Status-based? Evidence from excavations suggests all of the above, depending on the household. But one thing's consistent: these were not places of solitude. They were built for endurance. You pull your cloak tighter. Somewhere nearby, a baby starts crying. Its mother soothes it with a humming song that drifts across the room like a lullaby woven from steam and memory. A dog barks once in its sleep, then curls into a tighter ball. You shift again and feel the warmth of another body press close, not romantic, not intentional, just survival. That's the trick. You're not here for comfort. You're here to outlast the dark. Even the rich didn't sleep alone. High-status Vikings might have more elaborate bed compartments, with thicker pelts and carved wooden frames, but they still shared. With spouses, with children, with guards. Sleeping solo was seen as odd, maybe even suspicious. Why separate yourself from the heat? From the protection? And yes, even warriors, out on raids or travels, practiced the same logic. Cuddle now, pillage later. You'd find men curled side by side beneath cloaks on frozen beaches, huddled in tents made from ship sails or sheltered in abandoned farmhouses, pressed so close you'd wake up with someone else's braid in your mouth. And no one questioned it. Warmth meant strength. Tonight, you try to fall asleep to the rhythm of breathing. Close, deep, overlapping. It sounds like the tide. Like life, refusing to stop. Occasionally someone turns and the whole structure groans. A cough echoes. A blanket shifts. Then, quiet again, you dream of sun. Of wide green fields. Of a warm breeze on your skin instead of the constant ache of cold. But when you wake, it's still the same. Still fur against fur. Still a curtain of smoke above your head. Still Bjorn's knee jammed into your ribs, and still alive, because here, under this roof, warmth is a team sport. And bedtime isn't about comfort. It's about survival through the longest, coldest nights of the year. You wake up to a bleeding noise, and for a split second, you think it's a dream. But no, it's a goat. A very real, very vocal goat who has decided that your blanket looks edible. You blink, sit up, and remember, with a sigh, that yes, you're not just sharing your sleeping space with humans. The livestock are here too. In the Viking winter, animals weren't left outside to fend for themselves. They were too valuable, too precious. They were warmth on 4 legs. So into the longhouse they came, cows, goats, sheep, chickens, all given designated spots along one end of the structure, near the byre, separated from the living quarters by a low partition or sometimes nothing at all. You. Your family, and your cow Ingrid. Housemates, and you're not just tolerating it. You're relying on it. Animals give off heat, and in a world without central heating, they're one of the best ways to keep the longhouse above freezing. A cow can generate as much warmth as a small stove. A few sheep tucked nearby add up to something like a rustic space heater, albeit one that occasionally farts and chews loudly in the middle of the night. You swing your feet down from your sleeping platform and land in something squishy. It's either straw or something that used to be straw. You try not to think about it. The floor of the longhouse is layered in hay, rushes, and reeds, meant to soak up moisture. Waste, and general grime. Every few days, it's swept out and replaced, sort of. Mostly added on top of. Eventually, it becomes a dense, earthy mat that insulates from the frozen ground, but that's not the only benefit of keeping animals indoors. They offer alarm systems, sensitive to strange sounds or movements. They produce milk, eggs, and wool without needing to be coaxed through snowdrifts. And in the case of the pigs, well, Let's just say they're also the emergency food supply if things get desperate. Still, this isn't a petting zoo. You learn quickly that even a friendly cow takes up more room than expected. It breathes heavily, snorts, shifts its massive weight in the night, and occasionally lets out a low groan that sounds unsettlingly like a human with a bad dream. Chickens flutter, goats headbutt, and if you're not careful, you'll step in something you'd rather not identify, and yet, despite the noise, the smell, and the occasional mid-sleep hoof to the shin, you're grateful for them. Because every bit of warmth matters. Even the ambient heat rising from a goat's woolly back can mean the difference between frostbite and slightly chilly toes. Sometimes the younger children sleep closest to the byre, snuggled in fur blankets beside the sheep. It's not punishment, it's strategy. Kids lose heat faster than adults. A sheep is basically a living, breathing, bleeding hot water bottle. Sure, it kicks sometimes, but what's a little bruising compared to hypothermia? You watch one child, a tiny girl with tangled blonde hair, pat a sleeping lamb like it's a doll, then curl up beside it. The lamb doesn't move. It's warm, she's warm, and both of them will wake up to the same smoke-thick air you've already grown used to. Historians still argue whether the Viking byre system was universally practiced or more common in harsher regions. Some believe wealthier families kept animals in separate structures. Others suggest even the richest farms still used the integrated longhouse in winter for sheer practicality. Archaeological evidence points to floors sloped subtly to drain animal waste, indicating deliberate indoor stabling, and yes, it could get gross. The longhouse smelled. Lived in. A permanent bouquet of hay, smoke, manure, sweat, and boiled cabbage. But your nose adjusts. Eventually, it stops noticing. Or maybe it just gives up. You shuffle past a pig, scratch its ear absent-mindedly, and reach for the bucket of grain by the door. Morning chores mean feeding everyone, two-legged and four-legged alike. You toss some grain into the troughs, break the ice on the water pail, and smile faintly when a chicken hops up onto your arm like you're some kind of smoky Viking Snow White. The livestock, for all their inconvenience, are part of the family. They have names, habits, tempers. You know which cow kicks, which goat escapes, which hen lays double yolk eggs. And in return for their warmth and sustenance, they get shelter. Shared breath. Shared life. As you settle back near the fire, one sheep sidles closer and rests against your leg. You don't push it away, because here, in the middle of a frozen wilderness, huddled in a longhouse half full of livestock, you feel something surprising, not cold, connected, and that may be the warmest feeling of all. The fire's down to its final glowing embers, and your breath puffs visibly in the air again. The longhouse is quiet, but not entirely. A few rustlings from the livestock side. Someone snoring under 3 layers of fur. A muffled cough. And near the hearth, a solitary figure shifts, your cousin Torvald, on fire duty tonight. You had it 2 nights ago. You still haven't recovered. In the Viking winter, the fire doesn't just go out. It must never go out. Once the flames die, the cold creeps in, thick and fast, seeping into every corner of the longhouse like a ghost with an icy grudge. And so each night, one unlucky soul stays awake, or wakes every few hours, to feed the fire, adjust the stones, and make sure everyone else doesn't freeze in their sleep. Tonight, that unlucky soul is not you. For now, Torvald tosses another log into the hearth. It hisses, the sap catching, and warmth begins to bloom again, slow but sure. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and pretend to still be asleep. You're not about to make eye contact and get roped into helping. Night watch is lonely. Quiet. And not without danger. If you fall asleep on duty and the fire dies, it's more than just discomfort. Cold kills fast, especially for infants and elders. One bad night and half a household could wake up with frostbitten fingers, or not wake up at all. So there's pressure. And tradition. Every family has their own fire rituals, some whisper prayers to Thor, others to household spirits known as Veadir, hoping for warmth and protection through the night. Some use fire irons to shift the logs, poke the coals, or bury ember-filled stones into ash beds near sleeping spots. These ash beds retain heat longer than open flames, giving people another layer of defense against the chill. You once saw your aunt press a flat stone against the base of the fire, let it bake for an hour, then slip it under her bedding like a magical hot rock. No one else was allowed to touch it. Historians still argue whether fire duty was formally scheduled or just an unspoken, shared burden. Either way, everyone takes their turn. And no one volunteers. The job comes with more than cold and smoke. It comes with silence. Deep, endless, creaking silence broken only by the occasional crack of timber in the walls or a gust of wind testing the roof. You sit there, alone in the dark, poking embers, listening. And sometimes, when the flames dance just right, you swear you see faces in the shadows. Most Vikings believed the fire had spirit. It wasn't just heat, it was a living, watching thing. To let it die was not only foolish. It was disrespectful. Some even spoke to the hearth as if it were an old friend. Or a stubborn child. You chuckled at first, but after your last turn, when the fire nearly went out and the cold pressed in like a wave, you stopped laughing. Fire duty isn't just a physical task. It's a mental one. You have to resist sleep, even when your body begs. You pace. You hum old songs. You sneak bites of leftover flatbread. One cousin tried chewing birch twigs to stay awake. Another recited riddles under her breath, louder and louder until someone finally threw a boot at her from the dark. You watch Torvald now. He rubs his eyes, pokes the coals again, stares blankly into the orange glow. His face is lit from below, his breath rising like steam. He looks like a statue of some ancient watchman carved from smoke and fatigue. Sometimes, the fire watcher does more than just stoke flames. They listen for trouble. A fox rustling in the chicken coop. A creak too sharp to be timber. A knock at the door. It's rare, but not unheard of, for someone to approach during the night, seeking shelter or delivering news. And when that happens, it's the firekeeper who responds first. Other nights, the danger is more subtle. A spark catching on dry wool. A toddler wandering too close to the flame. One burned curtain, and the whole house could ignite. So the firekeeper's eyes don't just guard against cold. They guard against the fire itself. Tonight, all seems calm. The house snores. The livestock shuffle but settle again. And Torvald, bless him, adds one final log before wrapping himself in a fur and leaning back against the wall, eyes open just enough to pretend he's still vigilant. You sigh, shifting on your straw pallet. Your turn is coming again. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe the night after. But it always comes, and when it does, you'll sit where Torvald is now. You'll stare into the flames, listen to the breathing, feel the weight of 1,000 frozen nights behind you. You'll prod the coals, whisper to the fire, and hope the gods are listening, because keeping the fire alive is more than duty, it's legacy. You blink awake to silence, and snow. Not falling, exactly, but pressed against the walls, stacked high around the longhouse like nature's own insulation. Someone must have packed it there overnight, shoveling drifts against the outside of the building, sealing in the warmth and sealing out the worst of the wind. Welcome to Viking insulation, not wool, not stone, but snow itself. Yes, snow. The same bitter, biting, wet horror that numbed your fingers yesterday is now your ally. It turns out that snow, properly managed, acts as one of the best natural insulators you can get your hands on. The way it traps air in its crystalline structure means that, paradoxically, piling it around your home helps keep the heat in. Instead of out, you wriggle out of bed and shuffle toward the door. It creaks open against resistance. Someone's built up a snowbank there, high enough that you have to push through like you're emerging from a snowy cocoon. And when you finally make it outside, the quiet hits you like a soft blanket. The world is muffled. No birds, no rustling trees. Just the faint hiss of falling flakes and the crunch of boots through crust. The longhouse almost looks cozy now, half buried like a hibernating beast. Icicles dangle from the eaves, glinting like crystal spears. The snowbanks reach halfway up the walls. And every bit of it, intentional. You grab a wooden scoop from the pile and begin helping build it up more. Shoveling, patting, smoothing like a Viking sculptor. Your breath fogs the air, your hands sting in your mittens, but your muscles warm fast. You can see why they do this. Snow is free. It's everywhere. And in a landscape with no insulation boards, no fiberglass rolls, no triple-pane windows, it's the next best thing. Some households even dig into the snow. Not as punishment. As shelter. For short trips, emergency cover, or even extra storage, Vikings sometimes carved out snow dens, hollowed out spaces lined with straw, wood, or hides. A snow hut could hold warmth like a thermos if sealed correctly. Historians still argue whether these structures were primarily used for sleeping, storing food, or just temporary windbreaks. Probably all three. You remember a tale your grandfather told, about a family who survived a blizzard by tunneling into a snowbank beside their home, lighting a small oil lamp, and sleeping on straw beneath a hide. When they emerged 2 days later, blinking like moles, the longhouse roof had collapsed. But they were alive. That story comes back to you now as you glance at your own snow-fortified walls. Inside, the effects are clear. The cold still creeps in, yes, but it's slower. Softer. You notice how the air near the ground is less sharp. How the coals retain heat a little longer. How the wind outside howls but never quite breaks through, even the animals seem calmer. The byre is warmer today, the breath of the cows rising steadily, slowly, not in frantic bursts. The sheep lie curled together, half buried in straw. One of the goats has even fallen asleep on a warm patch of hay near the hearth, its legs tucked in, its nose twitching with dreams. You take your place near the fire. Wrap yourself in your cloak, and pull your hood low. Someone brings a bowl of warm barley gruel, and you hold it like a treasure. The warmth seeps through the wood into your hands, then into your core. You blow on it and watch the steam rise and vanish into the still thick air of the longhouse. That air, by the way, also thanks to the snow. The frozen buffer packed around the home muffles drafts, slows leaks, helps retain what little warmth your fire produces. You recall now that in deep winter, when snow was plentiful, some families even sealed cracks with slush. It froze into place like caulk made of ice. Not elegant, but effective, and when the snow begins to melt come spring, those same families scrape it away carefully, little by little, revealing the longhouse beneath like archaeologists of their own survival. Until then, they live entombed. Not trapped, preserved, there's even a certain beauty to it. The way snow curves around the roofline. The sculpted arches at the eaves. The glint of frost across a shutter's edge. Nature's artwork, commissioned by desperation and executed by hand. You wrap your hands around the bowl again and take a slow sip. Someone coughs in the corner. The fire cracks. Outside, the snow thickens its blanket. And for once, you don't resent it, you feel oddly grateful for this cold, silent, weighty shield pressing close around you. Because in a world where the night is long and the dark is deep, even snow can be a gift, if you know how to use it, and the Vikings did. You pull your hood up higher as a draft sneaks through a gap in the longhouse wall, sliding down the back of your neck like a finger made of ice. And that's with 4 layers on. Your face, exposed from brow to chin, stings with cold. Your eyelashes keep sticking together. Your breath curls into steam that instantly freezes in your beard. You blink, and feel it crackle, so tonight, you do what every Viking does, you cover everything. Out come the woolen hoods, pulled down tight over the head and fastened beneath the chin with a knotted strap or leather thong. This isn't some stylish accessory, it's survival. The hood isn't just for the top of your head. It drapes over the shoulders too, sealing heat into the neck and upper chest like a soft furnace powered by sheep, and underneath that, maybe a coif, a kind of underhood made from linen or thinner wool, designed to wick away sweat while keeping the woolen one dry. Wet wool, after all, is betrayal incarnate. It smells like regret and clings like a curse. Then comes the beard. If you've got one, that is. You're not shaving it off, even if it's patchy or unruly. Beards are insulation. A frozen face is miserable, but a frozen beard? That's just part of the uniform. The Viking beard wasn't just for looks or intimidation, it helped trap warm air around the cheeks and chin. You might even see warriors wrapping woolen scarves or spare tunic sleeves around their lower faces, creating what scholars have jokingly referred to as beard blankets. One saga mentions a man whose beard froze to his cloak, and while that may sound like an exaggeration, it's one you can now personally relate to. Still, the battle with the cold is relentless. You try breathing through your nose. It stings. You switch to your mouth. Your lips dry out instantly. You rub them with a smear of animal fat. Yes, that's right. No lip balm here. Just goose grease or leftover cooking lard. Effective. Unappetizing. You're not alone in your discomfort. Around the longhouse, everyone else looks like walking bundles of cloth and fur. Children have only their eyes visible. Elders mutter through scarves pulled halfway over their heads. And those on door duty wrap their faces with double layers before venturing out, looking like wool-wrapped ghosts. It's not just indoors, either. Travel in winter demands a whole new level of wrapping. You prepare for a trip to the nearby stream, a short walk, really, but in Viking winter, even that's an expedition. You wrap your head with a hood, then another, then a fur-lined cap on top. Around your face, you fasten a length of wool like a primitive balaclava, covering nose, cheeks, and neck. Your beard pokes out beneath, already stiffening in the open air. Then the final touch, mittens. Thick, thumbed pouches made from felted wool or even animal hide, lined with soft fur when available. Not exactly dexterous, but you're not doing embroidery today, you're fetching frozen water. Historians still debate whether Viking face coverings were a regular feature or mostly ceremonial, since few have survived in archaeological form. But sagas and stone carvings show hooded figures with clearly defined layers, and some burial finds contain cloth wrappings that could have served this purpose. You crunch across the snow, feet wrapped in thick wool socks, legs bound with puttees. Every step is slow, careful, deliberate. A fall here, with layers stiff and joints cold, could mean a broken limb and a very long, very awkward crawl home. Not ideal. At the stream, the water is frozen over, again. You jab it with a stick until it cracks, then plunge a wooden bucket into the slush. Your breath clouds the air. Your eyebrows are crusted in frost. And your scarf smells faintly of last night's stew. You are completely, hopelessly wrapped. And yet, still cold. That's the Viking reality. The layers help. The fur helps. But the cold always finds a way. So the real trick isn't escaping the cold, it's enduring it. One day at a time. One scarf at a time. One cracked lip smile through a frozen beard at a time. Back inside, you peel off the outermost layers. You don't hang them too close to the fire, steam and wool don't mix well. You drape them overhead, where the smoke will dry them slowly, where the smell will become indistinguishable from everyone else's. You rub your face. Your nose feels rubbery. Your ears itch. But you're warm again. Or warm enough. The others nod as you rejoin the circle near the hearth. Another journey survived. Another tiny victory earned, and as you wrap your hood loosely around your shoulders, letting the warmth creep back in, you feel a moment of quiet pride. You may be wrapped like a turnip in cloth, but you're here. You're breathing. You're warm, and that's everything. You sit near the fire, nursing warmth back into your fingertips, and watch as someone drags a large stone out from the coals with a pair of wooden tongs. It's glowing faintly, an angry orange at the edges, pulsing like a dragon's eye. They drop it into a shallow clay bowl, then tuck it carefully beneath a fur sleeping mat. That's not a cooking trick. That's a bedtime trick. Welcome to the Viking version of a space heater, hot stones and ash beds. You've already learned that fire is the lifeline of the longhouse, but its heat doesn't last forever. Once the flames die down, the room cools fast, too fast. That's where these simple but brilliant tools come in. Smooth river rocks, heated beside the fire for hours. Then buried under blankets or sleeping spots. They radiate warmth for hours afterward, creating little oases of heat in the vast cold of the night. You reach for one yourself, carefully. A rock too hot and you're branding your hand. Too cold and it's just a lump of disappointment. But just right. It's bliss. You wrap it in a bit of wool and tuck it under your cloak, letting the heat soak into your bones. The sensation is primal. Glorious. A small sun against your ribs. Not everyone uses rocks. Some households prefer heated bricks, or even iron tools warmed in the coals. But stones are the safest. They don't warp or crack as easily, and they're free. Just walk to the riverbank and take your pick. The only challenge is remembering whose rock is whose when it comes time to reclaim them from the communal heat pile. Then there's the ash bed method. It sounds strange, but you've seen it done. After the fire burns low, someone scoops out the coals, spreads them flat, and covers them with a thick layer of clean ash. That ash holds the heat in like a protective shell. Blankets go over the top, and voila, you've got a toasty sleeping pad that doesn't require constant tending. Of course, it's a little risky. A thin ash layer means you're sleeping on live coals. Too thick, and the heat never gets through. It takes practice, and maybe a few singed toes along the way. Historians still debate how widespread these techniques were. Some claim they were used mostly in mountainous regions, where wood was scarce and warmth precious. Others argue that ash bedding was a standard winter survival trick across Scandinavia. One thing's for sure, Vikings understood thermal mass long before it had a name. You lie back, stone pressed close to your chest, and listen to the longhouse settle. Somewhere nearby, a child giggles as a stone slips from their hands and rolls across the floor with a loud clunk. Another figure grumbles, stands, and retrieves it with a sigh. This is the nightly ritual. Like brushing your teeth, if your toothbrush was a rock that could cause second-degree burns, it's not just about warmth. It's about timing. The stones must be heated early, cooled just enough to avoid injury, and placed in position before sleep takes hold. The best sleepers are those who've mastered the rhythm. Heat, wrap, tuck. Sleep, and it's not only people benefiting from this. Smaller animals, especially lambs or piglets born in winter, are sometimes tucked beside warm stones, swaddled in straw and wool. If they survive the first week, they've got a fighting chance. If not, it's one more loss to the cold. You remember once helping your uncle warm a stone for an orphaned calf. He tied the rock in 2 layers of linen and laid it under the calf's belly, whispering words you didn't understand. The calf survived. So did the rock. And your uncle still swears by that method. The fire is almost gone now. Only the faintest red glimmers under the ash. You shift your stone, now merely warm, to a colder spot on your leg. It helps. Not just with heat, but with reassurance. Proof that something is holding the cold at bay, even if just a little while longer. The air is quiet, except for a gentle creak in the beams and the slow crackle of a log splitting itself in its final death throes. Around you, others shift in their sleep, stone-warmed and bundled tight. There's no electricity. No heating ducts. Just embers and patience, and yet, you feel safe. Not because you've defeated the cold, but because you've outlasted it. One fire. One stone. One night at a time. Tomorrow, you'll do it again. You lose track of how many nights you've spent buried in fur, with a goat breathing against your knee and your dreams flavored by the scent of smoked turnips. The days blur. The darkness never seems to lift fully. You begin to wonder if the sun has taken the winter off. So how do the Vikings survive the creeping madness of endless cold and shadow? They tell stories. You notice it after dinner, once bellies are full and the fire burns steady. People don't scatter. They gather. The longhouse becomes quieter, not because it empties, but because it fills with listening. All eyes shift toward whoever holds the carved wooden staff, the subtle signal that tonight, they're the one to speak. And so the storytelling begins. You sit cross-legged near the hearth, warm stone in your lap, and listen as a weathered voice begins weaving a tale of Odin disguising himself as a wanderer, or Thor's hammer being stolen by a frost giant, or a mortal who tricked the gods and was punished with eternal wind in his ears. It doesn't matter if the story is new or old. What matters is that it glows, just like the fire. These aren't just fairy tales. They're survival tactics. When the nights stretch into weeks, when snow piles against the walls higher than a man's head, when your world is reduced to flickering shadows and heavy breath, stories remind you that you are part of something bigger. Older, braver. They knit community as tightly as the cloaks on your back. Even children join in, retelling versions of stories they barely understand, adding extra wolves or longer sword fights. The elderly correct them gently, but no one stops them. In the darkness, everyone is a storyteller. You notice the quiet smiles, the nods between generations, the way someone sharpens a blade without looking up, fully enraptured. You realize that these stories aren't for passing time. They're for anchoring time. For making sure you remember who you are while the cold tries to make you forget. It's not just mythology, either. Some stories are personal. Tales of a grandmother who once caught a fox with her bare hands. Or the time someone's great-uncle survived 3 days in a snowstorm by drinking birch sap and sleeping in a tree. Whether true, embellished, or completely fabricated, they all serve the same purpose, to make the night feel less endless. Historians still debate how much of Norse mythology was told in longhouses like these, versus temples or sacred groves. But sagas mention skalds, poets and storytellers, traveling from village to village, bringing news and entertainment in one breath. And in the depths of winter, a skald could earn food, shelter, even status. Simply by spinning a good yarn. Sometimes, it's not spoken tales. It's song. You hear a low hum at first, then a layered chant, voices rising and falling like waves. The words are old. Maybe older than language itself. Rhythmic. Repetitive. The kind of thing that lulls you into calm. Even if you don't understand a syllable, music becomes a kind of insulation. Not against cold, but against despair. Other nights, someone pulls out a bone flute or a carved lyre, and the fire seems to lean in with you. Fingers strum. Feet tap. The melody drifts up into the rafters and hangs there like warmth. You're not in a longhouse anymore, you're in a hall, a feast, a dream. Somewhere, someone carves. You watch them draw a pattern into a bit of bone, maybe an animal, maybe a knot, maybe a rune that only they understand. Crafting in winter is sacred. With daylight short and travel risky, indoor work becomes the heartbeat of the house. Wooden spoons. Bowls. Dolls. Dice. Even weapons. Everything carved by firelight, shaped by patient hands and shared silence. You try it once, carving a simple line of waves along your eating knife's handle. It's rough, uneven, but yours. You hold it up, proud, and someone claps you on the shoulder. The moment warms you deeper than the cloak on your back. Even chores become rituals. Mending cloaks. Rewrapping handles. Darning socks with bone needles and coarse thread. You don't just pass the time. You use it. The cold forces you inward, not just indoors, but inward to yourself, and always, always, someone is talking. Recounting the shape of a dream. Repeating a warning about the ice on the creek. Reminding a child not to leave the latrine door open unless they want the troll to get in, and you join in. Tentatively at first, then with growing ease. You share a memory. A joke. A line of a tale you only half remember. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just told, because here, under beams blackened by smoke, wrapped in blankets that smell like livestock and pine, surrounded by people who all want to make it through, words are warmth, and the more you speak, the more you listen, the more you realize, the cold never really stood a chance. You lose track of the days, not because you're lazy, but because the sun has stopped showing up. When it does appear, it's like a fleeting rumor, hovering low, casting long, strange shadows, and disappearing again before your body even registers the glow. The darkness isn't just a feature of the Viking winter. It is the Viking winter, and it gets to you. You notice it in small things. The way someone stares at the fire too long. The way another person keeps yawning, even after 10 hours wrapped in fur. The laughter is quieter now. The stories shorter. The house full, yet somehow more silent. Vikings didn't have a term for seasonal affective disorder. But they knew it, they lived it. The longhouse might be crowded, warm, even lively, but the darkness presses in through every beam and every breath. Days blur into nights. Weeks pass in a dusky haze. And eventually, you begin to feel the weight not just on your shoulders, but in your mind. That's why they built rituals into their lives. Tiny pockets of light in a season full of shadow, you start to notice them. Someone lighting an extra oil lamp. Another person arranging bones or sticks in symmetrical patterns near the hearth. A bit of pine needle burned in the fire. A carved sun disk tied with red string hung from a rafter. These are not decorations. These are defenses, against despair. One family burns juniper in the mornings, claiming the smoke keeps away spirits. Another sings to the fire before sleep. It's not cheerful. It's slow, somber, almost a lament. And yet, it brings comfort. You ask about it once, and an elder shrugs. The dark eats if you let it. So don't let it. Simple, direct, unsettling, and then there are the rituals to welcome back the light. You'd heard of Yule, of course. The winter solstice celebration. But living it is different. On that longest night, the house is scrubbed clean, well, as clean as you can scrub a floor made of straw and goat footprints. Everyone wears their best tunics, even if they're patched. The fire burns higher. Special food is shared, and then someone places a log, massive, dry, carved with symbols, into the flames. The Yule log, you watch it burn for hours. It hisses. It pops. The flames dance higher than usual. People chant. Drink. Eat cakes sweetened with honey and dried berries. Children throw pine cones into the fire and make wishes. It's part joy, part defiance, because this night is the coldest. The darkest. The longest, but after this? The light begins to return. Historians still argue over how much of the Yule celebration was pagan ritual versus practical morale boost. Some say it was a sun worship ceremony, meant to coax the sun's return. Others think it was just a way to get through the worst night with warmth, food, and company. You're pretty sure it was both. In the days that follow, moods improve, barely, but noticeably. People stretch more. Laugh more. The music comes back, slower songs giving way to rhythmic clapping and quiet dancing near the hearth. You join once, awkwardly, stomping in place until your feet remember what joy feels like. Even the gods seem closer in winter. Torches are lit to honor Thor. Bits of food left near doorways for the wandering spirits of ancestors. You overhear someone whispering to Freya before sleep, asking for dreams that don't involve drowning in snow or wandering lost in twilight. You understand the need. Some mornings, your thoughts come sluggish. Your dreams are weirdly heavy, full of wolves and endless ice. You wake sweating under your cloak, even though your fingers are cold, but the rituals help, so does the company. You start to share your own methods. Rubbing pine needles in your hands for the scent. Braiding bits of spare wool just to give your fingers a task. Carving a sunburst into your bowl. You're not religious, not really. But you catch yourself whispering a thanks when the fire crackles unexpectedly high. You squint at the edge of the sky each morning, just to see if it feels brighter, and then one day, it does. Not much, just a sliver of golden light along the ridge. It only lasts 5 minutes. But it lasts. And when someone points to it, when the longhouse falls silent in reverence, you understand, you made it through the worst, not by being strong, not by being brave, but by remembering light, even when there wasn't any. You can't sit still anymore. Your legs are sore from too many hours spent crouched close to the hearth. Your back is stiff, knotted from nights curled awkwardly in a tangle of limbs, wool, and dreams that never quite settle. Even your mind has grown sluggish, like a window fogged from too much breath and too little breeze. Thoughts drift, blurry and slow, unable to gather into anything sharp or useful. So you groan as you rise, stretching your arms until your joints pop and your spine finally yields with a reluctant crack. Then you do what every Viking knows to do when the longhouse walls begin to close in like a too-tight cloak. You work, because winter may quiet the earth, but it does not stop the hands. The rhythm of life shifts, but it does not pause. Indoor work becomes the quiet engine of survival, humming softly beneath the sounds of wind and fire. No one rests simply because the cold is outside. Instead, they shift their efforts inward. They redirect their strength. They move with intention. Because to stay still too long is to freeze, and not just on the surface. The cold finds its way into the bones, and worse still, into the spirit. The longhouse may be dim, lit only by the hearth and a few oil lamps flickering near the walls, but there is nothing lazy about its atmosphere. All around you, there is motion. Not frantic. Not loud. Just steady and purposeful, to your left. A woman spins while using a drop spindle. Her fingers move with practiced grace, dancing with a rhythm as delicate as a spider weaving its web. The thread winds downward, twisting and thinning with each turn, the wool forming a lifeline of warmth for some future garment. Nearby, her son crouches over a deer hide, carefully scraping sinew from its surface with a curved bone blade. His brow is furrowed in concentration. Every stroke prepares the leather for boots, or perhaps for a satchel. The scent of cured hide blends with another aroma, beeswax, rich and earthy. You glance over and see someone kneeling near a worn water pouch, carefully patching the seams with wax and thread. You reach for your own task. A wooden ladle, half-carved and waiting, sits beside your stool. You settle near the fire and pick it up, the wood cool and unyielding at first in your chilled fingers. But as your palms warm, so does the wood. It responds, just slightly, as if remembering it once lived. You take your knife and begin. Each scrape along the grain becomes a quiet meditation. You do not rush. There is no need for flourish. Just steady forward motion, one careful cut at a time. This is how the Vikings measured the passage of time during the long, frozen months. Not with calendars marked on the wall or the ticking of any clock, but with what was finished. A pair of mittens completed marked a week past. A new set of arrows counted as 3 more days endured. Time was not recorded in minutes or hours. It was tallied and done. In tasks completed. In objects made, even the children are given roles, small but significant. A girl sits in the corner, untangling a bundle of yarn, her small fingers focused and determined. A boy squats near a basket, sorting dried beans into clay pots. Someone younger still scatters scraps for the chickens outside. Darting in and out through the animal doorway, cheeks flushed with the cold. None of it is idle work. It is contribution. It is belonging. In this place, every hand adds warmth. Every hand matters. And above, suspended near the smoky beams, rows of fish hang drying. You glance up and see the pale bellies of herring, split and gutted, glistening in the low firelight. They sway slightly with the draft, slow and deliberate, and their oil drips occasionally into the coals below with a sharp hiss, like punctuation in a sentence spoken by the longhouse itself. These fish are not for tonight. They are for the leaner days ahead. Preservation is not a single task. It is constant vigilance. If you do not smoke it, dry it, salt it, or hang it, you lose it. And in winter, loss is not an option. Across the room, someone is stitching a tunic. You recognize the shape and the faded dye. It belongs to your cousin. She is weaving a patch into its side, and her hands move with such quiet confidence that you cannot even tell where the tear once was. Her eyes are lowered. She does not speak. Instead, she hums a low melody, one that follows the motion of her needle. It slides through the fabric in a rhythm as precise as breathing. You consider asking her where she learned this craft, but the answer is already written in the air around her. She learned from someone just like her. In a winter just like this one. The knowledge passes on, thread by thread. Then there is the blacksmith. You wouldn't expect a forge in the middle of winter. But near the outer edge of the longhouse, just beside a vent cut through the wall to carry the smoke away, someone has set up a small smithing station. It is not for swords. No helmets are hammered here. The blacksmith makes tools. Simple things. Hooks for hanging pots. Nails for fixing beams. The occasional knife repair. Fire pokers. Bits and pieces that hold the larger world together. His hammer rises and falls in a steady rhythm, each strike a muted drumbeat against the quiet. There are no shouts. No sparks flying high. Just flame and metal and repetition. You pause in your carving, watching him work, the glow of the coals casting long shadows across his hands. The transformation of raw iron into something useful feels sacred. A form of magic powered by fire and patience. Historians today say that crafting during winter was not just an act of practicality. It was a ritual. A spiritual discipline. To make something with care was to offer a kind of prayer. A bowl carved well was not only a vessel, it was a hope for nourishment, a wish for abundance. A knife forged cleanly could outlast its maker, passed to a child and then a grandchild. Your ladle may not be perfect. Its edges may be uneven, the handle too thick. But you imagine someone else stirring stew with it one day, and the thought keeps your knife moving. You stretch your arms again and rise. Your turn at the loom has come. The loom stands tall, taking up much of the longhouse's eastern wall. Its vertical frame is strung with warped thread stretched tight, humming with tension like the strings of a harp. A woman works there, lifting and lowering the rods with practiced grace, guiding a wooden shuttle back and forth through the threads. You step beside her and take over. Your fingers are clumsy at first. You hesitate. But she smiles and nods, and soon your motions settle into place. Weaving is its own kind of spell. Each pass of the shuttle adds to the growing fabric, row upon row. A mistake here, corrected. A knot there, tied carefully. The pattern grows slowly, but with each step, it becomes more solid. More certain. You find yourself lost in the rhythm, your thoughts unwinding along with the weft. You wonder how many cloaks began like this. How many winters were measured by threads looped through looms, by the steady breath of women and men standing just where you are now. Somewhere behind you, a child giggles. A dog snores near the fire. A man whispers a joke that sends his neighbor into a fit of laughter so sudden and loud that she drops her bone comb into the straw. Laughter fills the space, bright and brief. And still, the work continues. The rhythm of hands does not falter, they do not work because they are commanded, they work because they know, movement chases off the cold. Making quiets the noise inside the head. It keeps the soul from freezing, and one day, when the snow finally begins to melt, when the rivers crack open, and the trees remember how to bloom again, it will not be luck that sees you through. It will be the tools you shaped. The cloaks you wove. The bowls and ladles and baskets and stories you built with your own 2 hands, so you keep carving, you keep weaving, you keep living. The fire is burning steady tonight, its light casting a golden hue across the walls of the longhouse. The warmth wraps around you like a second cloak, and the soft murmur of conversation, the scrape of wooden bowls, and the rhythmic creak of beams overhead all combine to create a cocoon of comfort. But outside, just beyond the door, there is another world entirely. It is a darker, colder world that calls eventually to everyone. No matter how inviting the hearth may be, the Viking winter does not offer the luxury of stillness for long. Sooner or later, you have to leave the shelter of smoke and song. Whether it is to check traps in the woods, visit a neighboring farmstead, hunt for game, or retrieve a stubborn goat that wandered too far, there comes a moment when the warmth must be left behind, so you begin to prepare. You know this routine well. It is not done in haste. It is deliberate, careful, and practiced. First, you layer your clothing. A thick tunic of wool pulled over your head. Leggings wrapped tightly to preserve heat. Your cloak, woven heavy and coarse, draped across your shoulders. Mittens for your hands, their interiors lined with fur. And boots, reinforced with fur and leather, worn over thick socks. These layers are not just clothing. They are your armor against the season. But today's journey is longer. The path will not be easy. So you reach for something more. The traveling hood, this is not the hood you wear inside. That one is soft, simple, worn more for comfort than survival. The one you need now is heavier, stitched for endurance. It drapes well past your shoulders, forming a shield against the wind. When you place it over your head and tighten the leather ties beneath your chin, the world narrows. You tuck your beard inside its folds. One blast of frozen air on your bare skin can sting for hours. You have felt it before and you have no desire to feel it again. Your feet demand special care. Depending on the terrain, you choose between skis or skates. The skis are narrow planks of wood with slightly upturned tips and simple leather bindings. They are far from elegant, but they glide across snow that would otherwise swallow your legs whole. The skates, fashioned from bone, are for the frozen streams, where ice stretches smooth and treacherous. You do not hesitate. These are not novelties. Archaeologists have unearthed ski fragments in Scandinavian soil dating back thousands of years, and some scholars still argue about whether such tools were luxuries or essentials. After one misstep into snow that reaches your thighs, the answer becomes clear. They are a necessity. You strap on your skis while balancing awkwardly on a rock just outside the longhouse. The bindings tug at your ankles. It is always a little clumsy at first. With your weight shifting and breath clouding the air, you reach for your staff. It serves many purposes. A walking stick. A balancing pole. A probe for testing the snow's depth ahead. You lean into it, and when your cousin catches your eye, he gives you a knowing nod. You open the door and step outside. The transformation is immediate. It feels like entering another planet altogether. The air hits your face with a shocking sharpness, slicing through every layer as if it were nothing. The quiet is total. Not silence as in absence, but silence that is full, almost sacred. The snow stretches outward in every direction, pristine and untouched. It glows faintly under the moonlight. The trees wear coats of silver frost, their branches brittle and shimmering. You begin to move forward. Your skis whisper softly across the surface, legs burning with the effort of keeping balance, heart pounding from exertion and cold. Traveling in Viking winter is never something done casually. It is slow, measured, intentional. You do not drift through the woods. You follow familiar paths, ones packed by use and frozen again by repeated passage. These trails are marked by bent branches or wooden stakes carved with signs. To leave them is to risk being swallowed by the snow. One misstep and your legs could sink waist deep. Getting out is no easy feat. It is a struggle, arms flailing, breath panting in short bursts as you claw your way back onto solid footing. For longer journeys, sleds are pulled behind. These sleds are not only for supplies. They carry people as well. Children too young to walk the full distance. Elders whose joints ache too badly in the cold. Those injured in work or war. They are bundled in furs and woolen blankets, their shapes barely visible beneath the layers. They ride behind, tied by ropes or pulled by reindeer or men, bumping and swaying across the frozen earth. The ride is not smooth. It is not warm. But it is movement. And movement means survival. You catch sight of animal tracks in the snow ahead. Sharp imprints, small and close together. Perhaps fox. Maybe rabbit. And farther off, a larger set that could belong to elk. You crouch, pressing a mittened hand to the snow. You check the depth. The shape. The direction. Your fingertips begin to tingle, then sting. You pull your hand back and press it under your arm. You always forget how quickly the cold finds its way in. The wind begins to rise. A low hiss at first, then a steady pressure that curls around your neck and snakes through the seams of your clothing. You lower your head, shift your weight forward, and keep moving. If you are too far to return before dark, you dig. A hollow in the snow can save your life. It is not comfortable. But it insulates better than open air. You line the bottom with pine branches or whatever you carried. You curl beneath your cloak and press your breath into the fabric near your mouth, warming the space around your face. If you have a companion, you lie close. There is no room for modesty. Body heat becomes currency. Some carry kits for fire starting. Flint, steel, bits of dried moss, and curled shavings of birch bark. Starting a fire in snow is difficult. Keeping it alive through the night is even more so. There are stories of travelers who cradled a tiny bundle of embers wrapped in wool. Held close to their chest, hoping the fragile heat would last until morning light returned. Eating is minimal. You carry dried meat, hard cheese, flatbread. You chew slowly. Your jaw works against the cold, muscles tight. Drinking is worse. Water turns to ice, so you eat snow carefully, a little at a time, or if luck favors you, you sip from a skin of broth kept warm inside your cloak, and yet, you continue forward, because this is what Vikings did. They did not ask the weather for permission. They did not wait for fair skies. The cold was a fact of life, as inevitable as hunger or gravity. They did not resist it. They worked with it. They covered more skin. They walked slower. They became stronger. They paid attention, they adapted. Some tucked hay around their legs, stuffing it beneath tunics for extra warmth. Others coated their cloaks in wax or animal fat to keep out moisture. Gloves with fingers bound together. Hoods so deep they created tunnels of warmth. Nothing was for show. Every item served a purpose. No garment was wasted. You reach a ridge, panting. And there, below you, sits the small farm you were sent to check. A single line of smoke trails from the longhouse chimney. It rises slowly, thick and black against the pale sky. Relief rushes into your chest. They are still here. Still warm. Still alive. You make your way down the slope, skis chattering against hidden patches of ice. When you reach the door, you knock once. The sound echoes into the stillness. You hear movement. The creak of boots. Then the door opens and you are pulled inside. Arms around your shoulders. Heat flooding your face. Smoke in your nostrils. And the unmistakable scent of stew, rich with fish and herbs, curling through the air. You are home again. Not your longhouse, perhaps, but a longhouse. A place of fire. A place of welcome, and in this world, that is more than enough, because travel in the Viking world was never just about reaching a place. It was about connection. About trust. It was about finding warmth where warmth was offered, and giving it in return. A seat at the fire, even when the fire was not yours, you sit. You thaw your fingers. You share the news you carry. And you rest. Tomorrow, you will rise again. You will step outside. You will fasten your hood. Strap on your skis. And face the cold once more, and then you will do it again, and again, because in this land, survival does not sit still. Even survival must travel. Tonight, you are not in the longhouse. You are not even anywhere near the welcoming light of a friendly farmstead. Instead, you are crouched beside a shallow fire pit hastily dug into the snow, wrapped in a cloak that somehow feels thinner and less forgiving than it did the day before. Your back presses against a boulder glazed with ice, its surface unyielding and indifferent to your discomfort. Beneath you, the frostbitten ground offers no warmth, no shelter, and no concern for whether you live or die. This is raiding season. Or rather, what is left of it when the stubborn grip of winter refuses to loosen. You didn't intend to be sleeping beneath the open sky tonight. No one really does. But the path of a raid rarely aligns with the tidy plans drawn on maps or calendars. The sea does not care for your timing. And Viking warriors did not wait patiently for the thaw, for blossoms, or for sunshine before setting out. Sometimes, the last raid of the season stretched too long. Sometimes, the journey home met a storm, a miscalculation, or simply the unavoidable need to stop. When that happened, you camped wherever the earth would allow. And you learned to endure what little comfort the world was willing to spare. Your longship now rests ashore, dragged from the icy waters and tipped onto its side. It is no longer a vessel for conquest but a crude, makeshift shelter. Cloaks and sails are stretched across the curve of its wooden ribs. Anchored with heavy rocks or lengths of driftwood to keep them from flapping away into the wind. Beneath this improvised cover, you and your companions gather. Shoulder pressed to shoulder. Knee against knee. There is no room for titles here, no ranks, no division between warrior and leader. In this frozen hollow, you are all simply bodies trying to stay warm, trying to see the night through. You lie upon a scattered bed of straw, though some make do with pine branches torn from nearby trees. The scent of the needles is sharp and clean, but they do little to soften the cold that creeps up your spine. The fire at the center sputters weakly, its flames licking low at the wood. This is not the roaring hearth of the longhouse. You have only a few logs left, and you must ration them. So each person takes a turn feeding the fire, carefully, reluctantly, hoping to stretch the warmth across more minutes, more hours. It does not chase away the cold, not really. It only keeps your teeth from clattering so loudly they wake the others. Food offers no real joy. There is no simmering stew to lift your spirits or fill your belly. There is only what you carried with you. Hard bread that you have to gnaw like bark. Strips of smoked meat, stiff with cold and salt. If you are lucky, a few frozen berries stored at the bottom of your sack, still intact after the journey. Each bite is slow. Your jaw aches from chewing in the cold. You take a pull from a skin of ale, and for a moment, a spark of heat flickers in your chest. But it fades before it reaches your fingers or toes. Sleeping outside in winter is not only cold. It is loud in ways that unsettle you. The wind roars and shrieks as it races over snow and stone. It lashes at the sail shelter, tugging at the seams, slipping through tiny gaps to sting your cheeks with sharp little claws of ice. You try to curl into yourself. You pull your hood tighter. You breathe slowly, trying to pretend the wind is just a story, just a sound that cannot reach you. There are voices sometimes, quiet ones, barely louder than the crackling fire. Some of your companions whisper to each other, sharing thoughts of home. Descriptions of wives, of children, of fields that do not freeze. Others tell jokes, dry and soft, more an act of habit than humor. A few hum old songs, chants passed from one winter to the next, half remembered and half reinvented. The melodies rise into the cold like smoke and vanish before reaching the treetops. And then there are those who say nothing at all. They stare at the fire, their eyes heavy with thought or fatigue, their hands folded tightly across their chests, simply waiting for the night to pass. You try not to let your mind wander toward the frostbite stories. You know them well. The one about the man who returned with 3 toes fewer than he left with, but still managed to dance at the next feast. Or the tale of the sailor who fell asleep under the stars and woke to find his beard frozen to the snow, anchored like a tent peg. Historians may continue to argue about how often Viking raiders truly camped in winter. Some suggest they relied more on allies, or forced their way into temporary shelter within villages. The sagas, as always, are vague. But none of that matters now. The numbness in your knees is more convincing than any debate. This is real. And this is miserable. Your only comfort comes from the nearness of others. Shared suffering is a strange kind of relief. Someone stirs beside you. Their shoulder presses gently into yours. They do not speak. They do not need to. The touch is a reminder. You are not alone. That is the quiet wisdom of surviving nights like this. You stay close. You share what you have. You drape cloaks over shoulders that shiver, whether or not they belong to you. You take turns watching, sleeping, feeding the fire. One person's warmth belongs to all. You remember a saying. An old one, murmured years ago by a veteran warrior during a night much like this. Better to smell your brother's breath than to feel hell's kiss. At the time, you laughed. The phrasing was crude, and the delivery slurred. But tonight, with your face buried in your hood and your knees drawn to your chest, you do not laugh. You nod, slow and silent. Eventually, exhaustion finds you. It does not sweep you into sleep. It drags you into something between rest and resistance. Your mind drifts. Your body remains braced. You dream in broken pieces. Images of hot stew, thick with herbs. The sound of laughter echoing in a warm hall. The weight of a hand on your shoulder. Breathing, slow and safe, from someone you trust. You wake up hours later, but you cannot tell how long you were gone. Time has dissolved into snowflakes and half-formed dreams. The fire is low now, barely more than glowing embers nestled beneath a crust of ash. Your cloak feels stiff. Frost has crept in during the night and hardened the fabric. The sky above has lightened just a little. Not a full dawn, not yet. But there is a hint of silver above the treetops. Someone nearby is already rising. They stretch their limbs, stiff and cracking. They groan. They brush snow from their shoulders, and their breath steams in the air. It is time to move again. You push yourself upright. Slowly. Every joint protests. Your legs are stiff, and your feet burn as blood stirs again in your toes. You stamp the ground. You swing your arms. You hiss between clenched teeth, muttering curses that dissolve into mist. The night did not kill you. But it came close enough to whisper your name. You help with the morning tasks. The gear is gathered. The sail is rolled, heavy and damp. The longship is cleared of snow, its hull scraped clean. No one speaks much during these motions. There is nothing to say. Only the shared, silent understanding that you endured. You survived, and you will again. Because sleeping beneath the sky in a Viking winter is not a test of comfort. It is a trial of endurance. It is grit forged in frost. It is brotherhood made visible. And when you finally return to the longhouse, stepping beneath the smoky beams and breathing in the familiar sense of fur and stew, you will not weep with relief. You will not boast, you will simply smile, because this, compared to where you have just been, is paradise. You are back in the longhouse now. The space is familiar, yet tonight it feels different. Somehow, the cold is heavier than before. Not the cold that stings the skin or bites at your toes. No, this is another kind of cold entirely. It does not linger in the air so much as it settles deep into the silence, as if the very walls are holding their breath. It presses down, quiet and solemn, and it makes your thoughts feel slower, heavier, as though they too are draped in frost. This is not the cold of weather alone. It is the cold that comes with stillness. With absence. With the unspoken. Not every Viking makes it through a winter such as this. The darkness is long. The nights are endless. And sometimes, the fading happens without spectacle. Tonight, no one speaks. Words feel too loud, too brittle for a moment like this. So the longhouse rests in near silence. In the far corner, a bundle lies carefully wrapped in fur. It is perfectly still, and its quietness is not the quiet of sleep. There is no movement beneath the hides, no slow rise and fall of breath. Just stillness that feels final. The fire nearby burns low, not because anyone forgot to stoke it, but because something about the moment calls for reverence. A brighter flame would feel out of place, too lively, too loud. Even the animals are different tonight. They move less, their breathing softer, their eyes lowered. It is as if they, too, understand that someone is missing, someone passed during the night. No one cries out. No one shakes a fist at the sky. It happens. Sometimes it is old age, a natural surrender after too many winters. Sometimes it is the cough that begins as a whisper in the chest and grows into something deeper, something more hollow and insistent. Other times, it is simply the cold itself, creeping in from the stone walls and claiming someone who leaned too long in the wrong place. The Viking world does not always offer you drama or warning. There is not always a clash or a final shout. Often, it is a quiet fade. A steady drift into stillness, as if the body decides to lie down and not rise again. You help carry the body to the threshold. Not far. Not yet. The ground outside is frozen, turned to stone by the weight of the season. There can be no burial, not now. Instead, the dead are placed in a temporary resting place, somewhere just beyond the door, beneath a carefully built cairn of stones or within the shallow embrace of a snow-covered hollow. It is temporary, but not without honor. When spring comes and the earth softens, the body will be moved. Perhaps it will be burned in the old ways, with flames rising into the sky. Perhaps it will be buried with care and remembered with carved stones and runes. For now, the snow preserves, and the silence marks respect. Historians still argue over what was most common in Viking winters. Some sagas speak of towering pyres, grand send-offs that lit up the sky. But in truth, wood was not always plentiful, and even grief had to bow to practicality. Fire was precious. It warmed the living, and so it could not always be spared for the dead. And so the cold, harsh though it was, became the keeper of bodies, preserving them until the ground could open once more. Inside the longhouse, no one is weeping. The mood is not one of despair. It is more complicated than that. It is a quiet awe. A solemn acknowledgement. Vikings did not fear death in the way others might. Death was not a surprise. It was always nearby, always present, a neighbor who waited just beyond the doorway. When it arrived, it was not met with wailing. It was met with memory. With stories. With a shared drink and a raised horn in salute. They did not speak of endings. They spoke of continuation. Of what came after. To Valhalla, if your death was in battle. To Folkvangr, if Freya chose you. Or, perhaps, simply to the earth itself, where your spirit would rest among those who came before you and rise again in the tales passed down by firelight. The warmth of the longhouse remains. The fire still flickers, but now the warmth feels different. It holds memory. It carries weight. Someone moves to the hearth and carves a small rune into the wooden beam. It is not elaborate. Just a symbol. A marking. A name. A quiet note that this person lived, and mattered. When you look closer, you see that the walls are filled with these runes. Some are weathered. Some have chipped away with time. Some are traced by fingers when no one else is watching. These are not gravestones, they are reminders. You sit by the fire, your hands resting on your knees, and you feel the gravity of your own body. You feel the rhythm of your breath and the quiet hum of life still moving within you. You are here. You have made it through another night. But not everyone will. That is the truth that Viking winters never try to hide. On some nights, the cold claims its own, but on most nights, you survive, and when someone is lost, they are kept close in other ways. Their tools are passed down. Their favorite sayings repeated around the hearth. A stew is cooked the way they liked it, even if you burn the bottom a little. Their presence lives on in gestures. In smells, in stories that still make people laugh or pause. You continue. You add another log to the fire, not because it is cold, but because the act itself matters. You sharpen your blade with care. You mend the tear in your cloak. You lean down and kiss your child gently on the forehead, your hand lingering for just a moment. You lie down once more beneath the beams darkened with soot and smoke, the same beams that have held so many nights like this one. And when the wind begins to howl outside, clawing against the walls and rattling at the shutters, you do not listen with fear. You listen with understanding, because you know now what the cold can take from you, and you know what you must offer in return. You do not fight the cold with anger or fury. You meet it with ritual. With closeness. With layers of meaning. That is how the Viking winter was kept at bay. Not because it was weak, but because each breath inside the longhouse, each tale whispered between friends, each tunic pulled tight and each stone warmed near the fire, was an answer. A quiet rebellion. A promise that life would not surrender easily. You close your eyes. The fire crackles, steady and soft. Somewhere nearby, someone begins to sing. Not loudly. Just a melody carried on breath, and slowly, the longhouse exhales once more. It breathes again, and now, as the flames in the hearth settle into a deep, amber glow, and the final voices of the evening fall quiet into the hush of steady breathing, let your mind drift. Let it wander slowly and gently back into the longhouse that holds you. Feel the texture of the wool layered around your body. It is scratchy, yes, but it brings comfort all the same. The weight of furs lies heavy and warm across your chest, and by your legs, a loyal dog sleeps, its warmth a silent gift in the night. The fire's crackling becomes a rhythm. A slow lullaby echoing through the beams, soft and soothing. Outside, the wind still stirs. It whistles and scratches at the wooden eaves. But it cannot touch you here. Out there, the cold is wild and voiceless. In here, the darkness has been softened. Tamed by the glow of flame. held at bay by the nearness of others. By the stories passed from mouth to ear, passed down through time, you are safe. You have made the long journey through the deepest night, wrapped in wool and warmth and the breath of those who endure beside you. You have kept the fire alive, protected its heart, and shaped something lasting out of heat and memory. You are still here, so take one more breath. Let it be slow and deep. Let it push the cold from your fingertips, from your thoughts. Let it remind you that you are not alone, you are warm. You are here. And out there, the snow can wait. Rest now, traveler of the north. Tomorrow, the fire will be waiting.